hope you noticed what it was that Esther read so beautifully for us this morning. It's the story, it's the next bit of the story of the Israelites escaping from Egypt. They've got across the sea and they're now in the wilderness. And boy, is it tough. So this is where we've got to. Rob talked to us about the food last week. This week we've got the story of the water. If any of you young adults would like to do something else, these piñatas were a bit odd for the story of water from the rock. They're just the llamas from South America, really. But if you want to have a go at designing one, that would be lovely. There's some paper and pens over there. Designing a piñata, a pot that would hold goodies that's a better shape for the story that we're using. So, I don't know how the Israelite families managed for 40 years in the wilderness, do you? Travelling for 40 years with families. My goodness me, a car journey used to do me in when they were little. You know, are we nearly there yet? Are we nearly there yet? Are we nearly there yet? It's not easy, is it? And travelling 40 years with families is quite an awesome thing. I've got some experiences just to share with you that you might recognise. You know, seeing a young child in a shop where it had got a bit warm, and he's with his mum and he decides to take his jumper off, and his mum goes, stressed out mum, if you take that jumper off, you've got to carry it. Recognise it? If you take that jumper off, you've got to carry it. Got it? It's your responsibility, you carry it. At which point the little boy takes a huge breath and goes, you've ruined my life. You know, that really stressy thing that kids can do. Or the other experience of being in a checkout queue, and the older child is doing a beautiful job of playing with his younger sibling who's in the pushchair. And he's going, peekaboo, 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 and she's giggling, and everybody in the queue goes, oh, isn't it lovely? This is what we have families for. This is beautiful, isn't it? And then he does another one, he goes, peekaboo, and then he smashes the little one full in the face, at which she yells, and the little boy starts crying. So Mum says, what did you do that for? And he goes, you know, as children only can with snot and everything else, I can't be the person you want me to be. Why tell these? Because, you know, often the Israelites are depicted as whinging, moaning people, travelling around when everything is wonderful for them. Well, a bit like a stressed child, you know, they're moaning there. But my sympathy's with them. My sympathy's actually with them. You know, when they get across the sea into the wilderness, and there was nothing for them at that point, I think my cry to Moses and thus to God might well have been, you've ruined my life. You've brought me away from everything I knew. And when they'd learnt the lesson that there was some food, but now there's no water, and they were urged to trust, I think I would be the one that says, I can't be that person you want me to be. I want to go back. At least we had shelter. It was blooming hard, but we had shelter, we had food, and we had water. And these are not whingers and moaners. These are mums and dads, aunts and uncles, grandmas and granddads, family members and family friends who are used to looking after one another and making sure that even in the difficulties there was food and water and shelter for their children. It's awfully hard, this life that they're being asked to live in the wilderness, isn't it? It's a real tough call, this. This story which is a foundational story of nationhood. It's how they become a nation. They tell this story for generation after generation, and generation after generation, and generation after generation. It's told verbally, and eventually it's written down, and it becomes, as I said, a founding story of how they became a nation. John's reminded us this morning, and none of us need reminding, I think. And I felt quite troubled really this week with the fact that we're looking at these wonderful stories about founding of nationhood, and actually we're seeing the same struggle worked out in the Middle East at the moment, a conflict of some of the deepest human pain from two different peoples who have their own idea of nationhood. There are no easy answers, are there? And I'll put some thoughts. I don't think we'll have groups this week, but I can put some thoughts on the growing deeper things. But you know a lot of the story of the struggle of the Israelites, but they formed this nation, and apart from the exile, where most of them were taken into Babylon, they came back and they reformed a nation. A nation of Israel lasted until AD 70, after the time of Jesus, when the Romans ransacked the temple in Jerusalem and persecuted the people of Jewish faith. And that's when they were spread out. They all spread out for safety across what was then the known world. And we know some of the problems that they had, and we could talk more, but it's not the place. But it ends up, after the horror of the Holocaust, with the efforts that were being made by the Jews themselves to settle in, not necessarily to start with as a nation, but to settle as people back in that area. And promises were made to both sides by our country and the French, and they weren't kept. And so you have two absolute horrors driving this sense of nationhood. You have the Holocaust for the Israeli people, and you have for the Palestinians, and you might know this word, the Nakba, the catastrophe, when all their land and thus their livelihood was taken off them, and they became refugees and took shelter in the Gaza Strip, particularly with this one. So you've got two really strong pictures of nationhood that are coming in conflict, and they're both being driven by the deepest of pain, by the deepest of losses, aren't they? You know, the loss and understanding of nationhood, getting it, losing it, getting it, losing it. It's such deep conflict. And, you know, I think it makes us ask, well, you know, how do we view this as Christians? You know, are we part of this? What do you know that feeling? You know, I've watched it, I've read about it, and you know, trying to understand. You know, we've talked before about things when we don't have any real agency to change, don't we? And how difficult that is. But I think, you know, as we look through the New Testament and you see the development, particularly for our faith, of the Jewish faith, we get these early stories which are about a special people that are specially protected with a special God. These are how the saints formed. But as the Old Testament goes on, you begin to get questions about how do we be with other people? What's our relationship to other people? And you might remember when we did the series on Ruth, some of that we raised, didn't we, about how the questions were being asked, how do we be with other people, you know, is it always about us and the speciality of our faith? But of course, for us, the big opportunity comes with the arrival of Jesus Christ into the story of our world. And no longer from that point in our scriptures is God's love seen as special for a special people, for a special protection. It's changed. It's for everybody. And it's a story of love and of the grace of God. We had the New Testament reading this morning, didn't we? About love your neighbour as yourself. Here it is, you love God. But the challenge for the Christian is, how do we love neighbour? How do we do it? And I think every one of us has to answer that for ourselves. How you love neighbour will be different in your life from what I can do now in my life. There will be different things, but that's the call, really. So just to go back to the water from the rock, that strange hymn, some of you will know and have sung it all your life, that we opened with. Others of you will go, oh, that's funny imagery, that's a bit weird. But it's there because I wanted us to be reminded that in Christian thinking, just as the Israelite nation was beginning to get its sense of identity and their needs were met by Moses hitting the rock and water coming from it, and we could talk so much about that, but we won't and we can't. And if you want to discuss it in your groups, there'll be stuff for you to do. But so often, the rock is used as an analogy for Jesus Christ. So water comes out of rock when they're traveling to become a nation. But for the people of the New Testament people, who are going to live in the love and grace of what Jesus has shown us, Jesus himself is the one from whom the water of life flows. And it flows for everybody now. It's not special. Everybody who wants it can have this water of life. And also, from Jesus flows his own blood, which is the opportunity for a new relationship with God, that is a relationship of love and openness to one another. Now we have the love of God for everybody. I know that doesn't answer the Middle East problem, and I could get nowhere near answering it, but it reminds us of our role. And I think it wasn't long ago I said to you, I'd listened to the Archbishop of Canterbury, and he said, when you don't know what to do and you feel you have no power, your power is to live your life as beautifully as you can. And I say that again. I don't know anything else to say. I know what our Archbishop said to us. Live our lives as beautifully as we can. So, thank you everybody who had a bash at the piñatas. I hope you all enjoyed the celebrations that came from it. The water of life is for everybody, so share your celebration in whatever way you can. Share the news of the love of God, and only use words if you have to. Share it in the way that we live. I just want to be fair. Did anybody do any drawings of a better shape for a piñata? No, I think they're too busy with the chocolates. That's fine. Thank you very much. And Melvin will be leading us in our prayers shortly, and we will be praying for the situation in the Middle East as well. May God bless us all. Amen. Amen.